Hello, Mr. Roberto Cardarelli. Welcome to this interview in which we are going to talk about extremely important question about related to Middle East and North Africa and the quest for stronger and inclusive growth. So, Mr. Roberto, you are Assistant Director in the Middle East and Central Asia Department of the IMF, and you serve as the mission chief for Morocco. So, Mr. Roberto, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. As you know, the Middle East and North Africa region faces a number of key challenges to achieving stronger, more inclusive growth. These challenges are diverse and complex, ranging from internal structural issue to external pressure. The first question, what are the key challenges that the Middle East and North Africa region faces in achieving stronger and inclusive growth?
Well, some of these challenges have been in the region for a while. These are long-standing challenges. Some of the challenges are new. The old ones that unfortunately remain relatively unresolved, despite we've been talking about them for a lot of time, for a long period. It's private sector remains relatively underdeveloped. It's an inclusion concept. I mean, you want to include kind of the private sector in a way. That's just across the whole region, which really needs a private sector, a vibrant private sector as an extra engine to growth, to create good quality formal jobs. So there's a need for policies that really free space for the private sector. We published a book last year. Yes. When we talk about the need to redesign the state-owned enterprise framework in order to leave more space to private enterprise, to level the playing field. We have a chapter in the book that shows that where countries where state-owned enterprises are more involved in economic activity, there's evidence of greater problems in the allocation of resources. There's a problem of governance, there's a problem of proper market reforms that increase competition over and above the role of SOEs. So developing a vibrant, dynamic private sector remains a key imperative for the countries in the region in order to create more jobs, high quality jobs in the future. Another long-standing issue is the inclusion of women and youth in economic life. Especially women, labor force participations of women in the region tends to be on the low side compared to other regions. And it's a pity because there's a lot of human capital. That if you look at the participation of women into education is very high. Also quality scores, they're doing very well. But then in a way they kind of fail to transition to the labor market. So there's a lot of human capital which really is not used when it comes to strengthen the economic foundations of these economies. And then there's new challenges. Climate change. Yes. It clearly has a disproportionate impact on a few segments of the population, including the poorest, the most vulnerable. Think about a phenomenon which is very much happening here in Morocco, which is droughts, which is affecting the agricultural sector with a lot of vulnerable work, a lot of women as well. And the other challenge which we discuss in the book is automation and the changing nature of work, artificial intelligence, robotics, which tends to be particularly affecting low skills type of jobs, which is another reason why it's imperative as well to strengthen human capital in the region, to create the skills that are going to be useful for the labor markets in the future. So old challenges, new challenges, a lot of things to do.
So thank you, Mr. Roberto. So what policy measures would you recommend for countries in the Middle East and Africa region to foster inclusive growth?
Well, going back to what we just discussed in terms of developing the private sector, a vibrant, buoyant private sector, I guess it's important to redesign the way that SOEs, their own enterprises, the role that they play. There's a lot of activities which are not really in sectors where the private sector could not operate. So it's important that they step out of sectors where the private sector can develop. Access to credit, it's a big issue. We're still far from other regions in the world, even if there's been progress done in the last few years. Governance and simplifying the business climate, reducing red tape. It goes for all countries in the world. There's not going to be any country in the world where they don't tell you that they need to reduce red tape. But it's important in this region even more, given that private sector needs more in terms of development. In terms of youth and women inclusion, the fact that women don't participate too much in the labor market to a certain extent reflects social norms. And there's not much you can do about that. I mean, let's be honest with it. I mean, that change comes with generations. But there's also a role for policies in terms of making it easier for women to participate to the labor market. From building more kindergartens. I mean, in Morocco, there's no public kindergartens.
Yes.
So the education reform that's been launched here has as an objective to build more of those, to give possibilities to women to leave their kids with other care in order to participate to jobs. Transport, I mean, making it easier and safer for women to move from one place to the other. There may be a need to change the tax system in order to make it easier, less expensive for women to have formal jobs, paying less taxes than the first earner of the family when the first earner is a man. So there's a lot of things and that can be done in order to address the policy angle of that dimension, and many other things that we discuss, of course, in the fund. The climate change, the green transition, it's a complex phenomenon. Clearly, there is need to respond to the water scarcity, which is a big deal not only in Morocco, in the region, of course. Producing water, building infrastructure that actually redistribute water, desalination plants, recycling water facilities and plants, but also redesigning the tariff system so that water is priced more in relation with its true cost and the scarcity. But also the opportunity to develop the renewable energies potential, especially solar and wind. Morocco is certainly a country where there's a lot to invest in order to produce, develop, and even maybe one day export energy produced, electricity produced in particular by solar and wind.
So thank you, Mr. Roberto. So moving to my last question. So as the mission chief for Morocco, could you share some specific insight about Morocco's economic situation and its growth prospects?
Well, Moroccan economy has been hit by all sorts of shocks in the last 3 years. It's been, from the pandemic to the terms of trade shock from Russia, invasions of Ukraine, the droughts, the earthquake now, and presumably the other shocks developing in the world. And still it maintained an impressive resilience. I mean, I wouldn't say we've been surprised, but we've certainly been impressed, at the fact that the economy, of course, was hit. Growth slowed down. But we didn't see, any particular cracks on the financing side. I mean, the current account deficit compressed, which is not necessarily a good thing because there were maybe less imports and less investment from the slowdown of growth, but still remittances and tourism, particularly over the last year and a half, have been very, very strong. Fiscal deficit increased, of course, with the COVID shock, but it's coming down. Morocco doesn't have any problem in financing the higher level of debt. It managed to regain and actually to re-go to international markets and to issue, you know, a considerable amount of US denominated, euro denominated bonds at good prices. Inflation went up, of course, like everywhere else, but it's coming down pretty fast. I mean, the central bank reacted, I think, appropriately by tightening the monetary conditions, but inflation here went up mainly because of supply shocks. I mean, especially food prices. So there's a little bit of limit to which monetary policy can act. It's not a demand or overeating economy type of inflation. One can assume that there's still some slack, but the supply shocks, the COVID, the droughts really have affected especially the agricultural sector, and food prices have been going up particularly fast. But you know, inflation is coming down, and we expect it to continue to come down eventually to the 2% objective of the central bank, implicit objective of the central bank in 2 years down the road.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Roberto.
Thank you.